Travel has a strange way of resetting your sense of distance. Places that once felt abstract suddenly become real locations with airports, taxi lines, and morning traffic. A few weeks earlier, the Philippines had only been a name I had heard occasionally in conversations or seen on a map somewhere in Southeast Asia. Now, it was where my plane had landed. My bag was on my shoulder. My sleep schedule was completely confused, and outside the airport doors, an entire city was waiting to introduce itself. Manila greeted me with heat. Not the dry, manageable heat of some places, but thick, humid, wrapping heat that lands on you the moment you step through the airport doors and makes your body immediately question every decision that brought you here. It was early morning and already hot in a way that felt personal, like the weather had decided specifically to test me. I stood outside arrivals with my bag and looked at the city stretching out in every direction and felt something I hadn't expected to feel at the start of a trip. Flat. Just flat. The traffic into the city took nearly 2 hours for a distance that should have taken 30 minutes. Manila's traffic is not like normal traffic where things move slowly. It is traffic that has made peace with not moving at all and seems comfortable with that arrangement. We sat on a wide road, completely still for 20 minutes at one point, while my driver remained entirely calm, which I respected deeply. Everywhere outside the window, there were jeepneys, which are the iconic Filipino public vehicles, originally built from old American military jeeps, left after the Second World War, and transformed over decades into something uniquely Filipino. They're long, narrow, covered in chrome decorations and bright painted colors and religious phrases and the names of places and sometimes portraits of celebrities, and they carry passengers on fixed routes through the city for very small amounts of money. They are loud and they are everywhere, and they are one of the most visually chaotic things I have ever seen moving through a street, and I mean that as a genuine compliment. My hostel was fine. The area around it was fine. I went to sleep that first night feeling fine, which is the least exciting way a trip can begin, and which I was trying not to be too honest with myself about. The next morning I decided that feeling flat was not acceptable and went walking. I found Intramuros, which is the old walled city that sits within Manila, built by Spanish colonizers in the late 1500s when Spain controlled the Philippines for over 300 years. Stepping through the stone gates into Intramuros felt like stepping into a completely different city. The streets are narrow cobblestone. The buildings are old, thick stone. There are churches that have been standing since the 16th century, still being used for morning mass. The chaos of modern Manila exists just outside those walls, but inside it is quiet and old and atmospheric in a way that requires no effort to appreciate. I walked slowly through it for 2 hours, and my mood shifted in the way that a city sometimes shifts your mood when it shows you something you weren't expecting. I stopped for food at a small restaurant near one of the old churches and ordered 2 things that someone at my hostel had told me I absolutely had to try. The first was sinigang, a traditional Filipino soup made with tamarind, which is a sour fruit used to give the broth its distinctive sharp, tangy flavor, cooked with vegetables and pork or fish. It arrived in a large bowl, steaming, deep and sour and savory at the same time. And the first spoonful was genuinely surprising in the best way. Sour in a way that wakes your mouth up completely. The second was adobo, which is perhaps the most well-known Filipino dish. Meat cooked slowly in a mixture of vinegar and soy sauce with garlic and bay leaves, until it becomes tender and deeply flavored and slightly caramelized at the edges. I ate everything in the bowl and used bread to collect what was left of the sauce, which is the highest compliment I know how to give food. That afternoon, the sky turned a color that suggested a serious conversation was coming. Within about 4 minutes of that color appearing, the rain arrived. Not gentle rain, not inconvenient rain. Rain that falls in thick, warm sheets, with the confidence of something that has been planning this for a while and is not in any hurry to stop. I ran. The nearest shelter was an SM Mall, which stands for Shoe Mart, though these malls in the Philippines have long since expanded far beyond shoes into something closer to small cities under one roof. I pushed through the doors and the air conditioning hit me like a physical object, cold and immediate and genuinely wonderful after the heat outside. I stayed in that mall for 2 hours. I am not proud of this. I am also not ashamed of it. I walked around, bought a cold drink, sat in the food court, and watched the mall fill up with people who had clearly made the same calculation I had about the weather outside. Filipino mall culture is something specific and particular and worth observing. Families move through it together in large groups across multiple generations, grandparents and small children navigating the same escalators. The food court has every kind of food available in the world, alongside distinctly Filipino options. People treat the air conditioning with the reverence it deserves. Nobody seems to be in any particular rush. Outside, the rain hammered the glass walls, and inside, life continued comfortably, and I sat there drinking something cold and thought that there were worse places to wait out a tropical storm. The domestic flight from Manila to Puerto Princesa, the main city of the island of Palawan, takes just over an hour. I had booked it on the recommendation of everyone I had spoken to about the Philippines, because Palawan is consistently described as one of the most beautiful islands in the world. And I had learned enough about travel to know that when everyone says the same thing about a place, that particular piece of advice is worth following. The plane was small, the flight smooth, and when we descended toward the island, I could already see the difference from the window. Green, intensely green, the kind of green that belongs to places with enormous amounts of rain and heat and life. The sea around it was not one color but several, shifting from deep blue far out to something lighter and then to colors closer to the shore that I did not have accurate names for. From Puerto Princesa, I took a van to El Nido, a small coastal town at the northern tip of Palawan. The journey takes around 5 hours on a road that winds through jungle and over hills and past small villages where children wave at passing vehicles, without any particular reason other than that waving seems like the right response to a vehicle going past. I sat by the window and watched the landscape move by and felt something I hadn't felt since arriving in the country 2 days earlier. I felt interested, properly, alertly interested, in the way you feel when a place starts talking to you and you start listening back. El Nido announced itself not with a sign or a sound, but with a view. The van came around a curve in the road, and there below was the bay, and rising from the water around it were limestone karst formations, which are tall, dramatic rock formations shaped over millions of years by water and weather into sharp, irregular towers covered in green vegetation, jutting straight up from the sea. Between them and around them, the water set in colors that genuinely required a moment of processing. Turquoise in the shallows, deeper blue further out, with variations in between that shifted as the light moved across the surface. I pressed my face against the van window exactly the way I had pressed it against the plane window arriving in Sao Paulo, and for the same reason. Sometimes, the only response to something beautiful is to get closer to it. My guest house was simple. A small room, a ceiling fan, a window that opened directly onto the beach so that the sound of the water was constant, a permanent background presence like something breathing slowly. I put my bag down, walked straight outside, took off my shoes, and stood in the sand at the edge of the water. The sea was warm. The light was going golden as the afternoon moved toward evening. I stood there for a while doing nothing except being in the exact place where I was standing, which is rarer than it sounds and more valuable than most things. The island hopping tour left early the next morning on a bangka boat, which is the traditional Filipino fishing and passenger vessel, long and narrow and made of wood, with bamboo outriggers extending from both sides, like arms stretched out for balance, keeping the boat stable on the water. The sound of a bangka engine is particular and unhurried, a low, steady rhythm that matches the pace of moving through calm water between islands with nowhere urgent to be. We visited a series of places that each seemed impossible until the next one was more impossible. A hidden lagoon reached by swimming through a narrow gap in the cliffs, the rock walls close on both sides, and then suddenly opening into an enclosed circle of water, completely surrounded by limestone. The surface mirror still, the light coming down from the open sky above and turning everything inside a pale, luminous green. I floated on my back in the middle of it and looked up at the circle of blue sky above the walls of rock, and felt the particular smallness that beautiful enclosed places produce, a smallness that is not uncomfortable, but clarifying. We ate lunch on a beach that the boat captain referred to simply as the beach, suggesting that it required no further identification. White sand, no buildings, no other people, the jungle beginning immediately where the sand ended. The crew built a small fire and grilled fish they had brought from the boat, serving it with rice and a sauce made from vinegar and garlic and chili that was sharp and bright and perfect against the smoky fish. We ate sitting on the sand with no table and no chairs, and the water in front of us, doing its color-changing thing in the afternoon light. And it was one of those meals where the setting does as much work as the food, and together they produce something that a restaurant could not replicate regardless of effort or expense. On my second full day in El Nido, I walked along the beach away from the main town in the early morning, before the tour boats had left, and while the bay was still quiet. Further along the sand, I came across an older man pulling a small fishing boat up onto the beach, moving slowly and methodically the way someone moves when they have done the same task thousands of times. His catch was in a bucket. He saw me and said something in Filipino, which is the national language also known as Tagalog, and I said I didn't understand, and he switched without hesitation to simple English and asked if I was hungry. I said yes, which was true, but also felt like the only possible answer. He built a small fire from wood stacked near the tree line, cleaned 2 fish with the efficiency of long practice, and cooked them on a simple grill over the fire. He cooked rice in a pot. He produced from somewhere a small container of sauce and a lime cut in half. We sat on the sand and ate together and talked in the way that people talk when language is partial, but willingness is complete. He had been fishing this bay for 40 years. His children had moved to Manila. He stayed because the sea was here, and the sea was what he knew. He said this without sadness, the same way the chai seller in Delhi had talked about his family's market stall, as a simple fact about a life that had taken a particular shape and fitted it well. The fish was fresh and clean tasting, and the rice was good, and the lime juice over everything made it bright. And I cannot tell you the name of the sauce, but I can tell you, I would eat that meal again without hesitation every day for the rest of my life, if given the option. My last evening, I swam one more time as the light left the sky, the water still warm even as the air cooled slightly, and then sat on the sand and let myself dry slowly and watched the stars appear. In El Nido, there is very little artificial light, and so the stars are not the handful you see from a city, but the full version, thousands of them in every direction. The kind of sky that makes you aware that city life involves a permanent and significant subtraction from the world. I sat and looked at them for a long time. I thought about Manila on day one. The heat and the traffic and the flat feeling and the 2 hours in a shopping mall hiding from rain. And then I thought about where I was sitting at that moment. On a beach in Palawan with warm sand under me and that sky above me and the smell of the sea and the memory of fish cooked on a fire by a man who had fished the same water for 40 years. One country containing both of those things, the rough entry and the extraordinary reward. I almost didn't go. I almost clicked away from that flight deal on that tired Wednesday evening and watched something on television instead and never known what was waiting on the other side of the decision. The stars were very bright. The water kept moving. I stayed on that beach much longer than I meant to, which felt like exactly the right thing to do. All right. If you made it through this shadowing session today, that already says something about your discipline. This repetition and consistency combination might look boring on paper, but it is one of the most powerful ways to build fluent, natural English. Keep showing up like this, and your brain will slowly adapt. Trust the process. If this helped even a little, consider liking the video or subscribing. It lets me know these sessions are actually making a difference. We'll catch up again soon. Take care. Till then.